The landscape of scams has evolved exponentially. There's now no shortage of methods to reach someone at the other end of the world, not just through calls, but also emails, text messages, and alerts. Not to mention, the average number of devices owned by a single individual is at an all-time high, meaning scammers now have more ways to reach their victims as people are constantly connected wherever they may be in the world. Here in Australia, while we're famous for our natural wonders, including beaches, deserts, and iconic landmarks like the Great Barrier Reef or the Sydney Opera House, we're also, unfortunately, popular with scammers worldwide. According to a 2021 report from Microsoft, Australians ranked as the second most likely to fall for scams, surpassed only by India. The Real Digital Risk Report in 2023 by Real Insurance supports this, revealing that 47%, almost half of Australians, reported being targeted by online, email, or phone scams. Notably, these figures only account for reported cases, and many victims fail to report the scams they encounter. While the government and law enforcement have taken a few steps to try and limit these scams over the last few years, there's still a growing number of them that they just can't seem to keep up with. Now, even YouTubers have become involved in trying to educate and raise awareness among the general public. One noteworthy segment on YouTube dedicated to this cause is known as scambaiters. Individuals who engage with scammers to identify potential victims, issue warnings, or simply waste the scammer's time. Popular scambaiters on YouTube include channels like Scammer Payback, Kit Boga, and Jim Browning. Today, we have Jim Browning here with us to break down some of what he sees when he contacts these scammers, providing us his valuable insight into some of the methods that these scammers may employ and how we can identify these scams.
Hi, this is Daniel from Amazon Customer Service.
The robocall. Scammers have come a long way. Not too long ago, there weren't any automated methods of reaching their victims, but in the last few years, things have changed.
There weren't any robo messages at the very start. It was like cold call, and this is Microsoft, and you've got a problem with your computer. That was the way it started. These days, you're far more likely to hear the robocall message, the electronic voice, usually a woman's voice, saying, "This is your bank," or "This is Microsoft," or "This is the government."
An unauthorized purchase of an iPhone XR 64 gigabytes for $749 is being ordered from your Amazon account. To cancel your order, or to connect with one of our customer support representatives, please press 1 or simply stay on the line. Please press 1 to connect with our customer support team.
Using robocalls is an efficient method for scammers to reach a large number of victims. And a victim who calls back the number on the robocall is also likely to be gullible enough to fall for the rest of their scam. They pretend to be Microsoft, Amazon, or even the government. While in the US, they may pretend to be the IRS or the Internal Revenue Service. Here in Australia, commonly they pretend to be the Australian Tax Office. They can also pretend to be banks like Westpac or Commonwealth Bank, or network providers like Telstra or Optus. One of the key ways to identify a scam is that these organisations are likely to never contact you directly on your phone, and especially not starting it off with a robocall. When these doubts kick in, your best bet is always going to be hang up the phone, find the official number of the organisation, and call them to confirm the authenticity. When you try to do this, no legitimate organisation is going to attempt to stop you. If they do, it's a clear indication that the caller on the other end is a scammer. The Technobabble.
Well, so a lot of it's psychological, and if you've heard any of the technical scams, they always give very worrying sounding diagnosis, and they will basically do technobabble, so made up terms which sound frightening enough that you think you should be paying this person to get rid of the viruses or hackers or whatever the term they're using.
Ma'am, my name is John Weaver, and I'm calling you from Computer Maintenance Department. And this call is about your personal computer. You understand? Ma'am, we are receiving some error and warning messages coming from your computer. And that's why we are calling you today, okay?
Scammers use a lot of what Jim refers to as technobabble, and he mentions it's all psychological. It's a way to frighten you with words you might not understand. In fact, Technical scams often depend on the victim not understanding exactly what's going on in their computers, which is why the elderly, who aren't generally proficient in technology, are often the perfect targets for these scammers. Some Technobabble they may use are viruses, hackers. They'll have you open a command prompt window and type a command such as netstat and show you a section and highlight active connections or listening ports or foreign addresses. While these may sound scary to someone unfamiliar with this command, they're not usually pointing out hackers connected to your device or nefarious foreign individuals in your computer, which scammers will often try to get you to believe. Instead, they may be pointing out your network devices in your house, like your router, your modem, or printers. Another thing that these tech scammers might do, they'll open Windows Event Viewer to show you that your computer is riddled with errors and that you'll need to pay a certain amount so that they can fix those errors. While in reality, these errors are nothing more than a set of harmless logs that come with your operating system, the remote connection, and the bank account. One of the most important steps for these technical support scammers is to be able to gain access to your computer. While doing this helps them initially pull up things like the netstat command or the Windows Event Log Viewer to frighten you, their primary goal is to get you to open your legitimate bank account while they observe. In order to execute this, they'll use some popular remote connection tools like AnyDesk, TeamViewer, or UltraViewer. These are some of the main tools they like to use, but they may try other ones as well.
The scammers want access to your mobile device or your laptop or computer. You have to log on to your bank because they're giving you a refund, and the refund's going to go wrong and they're going to pay you too much money. But what they're really doing is trying to find out just how much money you've got in your bank account. And their ideal victim is somebody who has a current account and a savings account, because they can have a look just how much money this person has, and they will aim their refund or the amount of money that they're supposedly going to give to you at exactly how much money you've got. So they want to drain every penny that you've got.
What Jim is describing here is the typical refund scam. In fact, a large majority of technical support scams are refund scams. The idea here is that scammers pretend that their organisation is shutting down a service or claim that they've been accidentally overcharging you and they want to refund you this amount of money, typically around $300 or $400. In the process of sending you this money, they pretend to, as Jim pointed out, send you too much money. And the way they do this is generally by transferring some amount from your savings account to your current account, and then using a browser tool called Inspect Element to change the way the transfer looks and make it seem as if you've received too much money from their organization. They'll say they accidentally added an extra zero and now your $300 refund has become a $3,000 refund. This is a climax of the refund scam. Now they've turned it around on you and you suddenly have to send them $2,700 back, completely unaware that they never sent you any money in the first place. One of the ways that you can tell that it is most definitely a scam is if the scammers are instructing you to purchase gift cards in order to process a refund. No legitimate organisation is ever going to operate in such a manner. While refund scams like this are quite common, even here in Australia, they're not as common as they are in the US, which unfortunately also means that not a lot of people here are aware that these scams exist. Refund scams can also come in various different forms. Tax refunds or toll refund scams are especially common here in Australia, and they may often be delivered through SMS or email with an embedded link. For these, just examine the number or the email it's been sent through, and just as before, confirm with the official organisation if the claims have any merit. The investment scam, pig butchering.
They're not always about robocalls. In fact, the investment scam, as you say, is one of the huge ones. The biggest one, though, I see at the minute is the pig butchering scam, which is a combination of a romance scam and an investment scam. So it starts off usually by on a dating website or a random message from a stranger, and that turns into a supposed relationship. And that kind of romance element of it means that the scammers will work for days, weeks, and months just having a conversation with you before they introduce this concept of, oh, I've made all my money through this investment, you should invest something in it too. And that is an absolutely horrible one, because you suffer from two things. Your girlfriend, your supposed girlfriend, or your boyfriend, whoever they're pretending to be, is the one that you've built up trust with over days, weeks, months. And then all of a sudden, when you invest, on paper you're making money, so you're encouraged to spend even more in this investment. So this is the fattening of the pig, if you like. And then eventually you get to the point where you've made all this money and you attempt to withdraw it, and there's some obstacles for you to withdraw it. You haven't invested enough, you haven't reached the threshold, you have to pay tax. They'll come up with all sorts of excuses why you can't invest it, so they'll encourage you to invest that little bit more and more and more, and eventually you get to the point where you realize you can never withdraw that money. That money was never there to begin with. It is all a scam.
This is not an easy scam to digest. As Jim mentions, you're dealing with your supposed romantic partner or friend. However, they're actually a scammer and never really existed in the first place. To add to that, they've made you invest money into a scam that you can't get back. This is one that we see in Australia quite a bit. According to Scamwatch Australia, romance scams are the second most prevalent, just under investment scams, with the two of them costing a combined total of over $309 million in just the last year. In fact, the Australian Federal Police released a statement specifically highlighting the pig butchering scam just this last month.
The AFP is warning that a manipulative and costly financial scam called pig butchering, also known as romance baiting, is targeting Australians with the promise of friendship and financial windfalls. Pig butchering is a scam where offenders gain the trust of victims over a long period of time before encouraging them to invest in the share market, cryptocurrency, or foreign currency exchanges. Traditional romance scams are often initiated on dating apps, but pig butchering often starts with cold texting individuals on messaging apps. Pig butchering doesn't target individuals with the false hope of a relationship, but instead initiates a conversation looking for friendship. Over the course of months or years, the scammer will flaunt a lavish lifestyle and leave a trail of comments about their wealth, such as bragging about the value in their cryptocurrency wallets. Once victims ask how they are making their money, victims are directed to a complete replica of an investment site that shows the growth of an investment, which they are then tricked into investing in. Victims think they are trading on legitimate platforms, but the money is actually siphoned into an account owned by the offenders, who created the fake platforms that look identical to well-known sites. If you've fallen victim to a scam, don't be embarrassed. Alert authorities and think about telling your friends, family, or community what happened. The more others know about these unscrupulous scammers, the harder it will be for them to target others. If you believe you are a victim of cybercrime, report it to reportcyber@cyber.gov.au. If there is an imminent threat to your safety, always call 000.
While the statistics show an excessive amount lost to this specific type of scam, the AFP even notes that the figures could be much worse, as often victims are too embarrassed to reveal that they've lost money in a romance scam. It's important to note that sometimes these scammers don't just go after you, but even people you may be close with.
People, unfortunately, have fallen victim to this numerous times, and it can be completely devastating, because not only do you encourage your own investment, but they will reach out to, they will encourage you to reach out to your family members to also invest in this as well. So it's absolutely horrible, horrible scam.
How scammers pick their target. With all these scams around, there's a question that pops up. Are the victims being picked at random, or is there some sort of method to their selection process? Of course, when it comes to dating scams, there's no shortage of applications out there. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge, and a ton more apps out there for scammers to identify and exploit potential victims. But when it comes to scams like the refund scam, scammers like to know who, are the most vulnerable. They want to know the easiest targets to manipulate. So where do they get this information?
I think the answer is as varied as the scams and scammers themselves. There isn't a huge central point of this information. Whenever I only ever see a very small snapshot of the scams actually happening, so I can at times see exactly what the scammers see on their computers. So whenever it comes to getting data in, almost invariably I will see someone emailing a huge spreadsheet or WhatsApping a huge spreadsheet, and you just have no idea where that's come from. In the majority of cases, it's in an Indian call center, and it will be some other Indian name. And that's as much as I see of where could this data have come from. There's the odd larger organization. I'm talking particularly about India here. And those larger organizations, a few of them are as sophisticated as having their own database of people's names, addresses, phone numbers, and they will cut that data and send it out to others. So there are definitely some organizations which are like that. But because I can download files from scammers' computers, the vast majority of it is hand-me-downs, and it's just databases which are extremely out of date.
Jim tells us that there are huge spreadsheets of victims, which can often be outdated spreadsheets. And we've seen this quite commonly where people will buy new SIM cards, numbers that used to belong to other people previously, as telephone companies do resell these when a number is deactivated. And there's an excessive amount of scam calls to these numbers where the victims get called out by the name. These numbers likely belong to previous victims or vulnerable victims who have very consistently fallen for these scams and consequently ended up on this spreadsheet. You'd imagine data like this is sold in a very hush-hush manner, like on the dark web or somewhere out of sight. But Jim tells us how openly this data is sold and shared, and how the scammers don't seem to mind the danger that may pose to them for being so public about the exchange of information.
That's the thing, that they quite openly resell those databases. So there is value in it. In fact, if someone's selling what they will call fresh leads being potential scam victims, there is value in that. And believe it or not, it is done so openly. You think the dark web, what I see is this is mostly things like Facebook groups and Skype groups and WhatsApp groups where they buy and sell this. And I have, with my Jim Browning logo on it, which says tech support scams, and it will cross through it, I have signed up to some of those Facebook groups where these people are buying and selling your and my personal data. And it is done incredibly openly. They will sell not only your data, but things like bank accounts in various countries. They will sell money mule services to people who will eventually launder that money. And yes, I naively thought that must be all done on the dark web. But if you just search on Facebook groups, for example, for B2C or leads, or they will call it B2C processes, you will find some of those groups already, and they will quite openly put their phone numbers at the bottom of it. And I've always thought to myself, well, surely the police could clamp down on these sorts of people who were selling this data, and it must be illegal. But yet I see very little evidence of anyone, meeting some of these people and going, what you're doing here is illegal. And it's amazingly open. And you think all of this would sit on the dark web and only the dark web, and I'm sure some of it does as well. But you don't even need to go to that extent. I think, personally, I don't know whether this is true or not, that it's been going on for so long and so many years, and this is the quick way to make a bit of money, that they don't really care. They will take the risk and say, you can buy data from me, and you can see it even in the screenshots that they use. They will show screenshots of how successful their spamming campaign will be, or their email campaign, or telephone campaign. They will give examples of the type of spreadsheets or little databases that they're using of people's personal data. And you think, I mean, how much more blatant and obvious can this be? But yet it still goes on.
The origin and motivation. We've talked a little about the most common scams that you might be exposed to, but we've yet to touch on where these calls and scams originate from. While you're likely to see quite a few scam calls, emails and SMSs originating locally, especially the ones that target Australians, there are a large number of scams that originate from other countries where a lot of Australians become targets simply because of how large scale some of these operations are.
Yeah, it kind of depends on the scam. When it comes to, I guess, a lot of phone call-based scams, so the ones that start off with robocalls or just a completely blank cold call, so that starts off with, hello sir, this is whatever. Those, unfortunately, 90% of those types of scams come from India. And there's good reasons for that. The expertise to set up call centers, for example, because big companies invest in India, the expertise is there. And that, unfortunately, coupled with the fact that data may be there as well, and there are, all sorts of opportunities to get into it. You get paid 3 or 4 times in a scam call center what you would in a legit center. All those factors kind of make the fact that, sadly, if you got a telephone-based scam, more than likely the voice you'll hear will be Indian, which is sad. It doesn't reflect on India as a nation, but it's unfortunate that that's just the way things are when it comes to telephone scams. But there are other sorts of scams. We've mentioned Nigeria, which is obviously associated with different types of scams, 419 scams, romance scams could be anywhere. Investment scams also could be anywhere, and a lot of, I found, Eastern European countries like Georgia, maybe obscure nations, but again, if the expertise is there, it has a huge difference on the type of scam you will get. So more than likely your investment scam could be anywhere, but from my own personal experience, Eastern Europe seems to be high up on that list.
But regardless of where these scams originate from, the question is, why do they scam in the first place? What brings them into a situation where they're exploiting innocent people for their hard-earned cash? How much of a moral compass do these scammers have? Can they even be appealed to emotionally? Is it that they're in a position where it's impossible for them to not be involved in such a revolting job, where their primary intention is to make themselves richer whilst destroying the lives of others? Well, considering Jim has spoken to hundreds or thousands of these scammers, we decided to ask him.
Well, I mean, I've asked quite a number of them that exact question, and you typically don't get the true answer, and the true answer is greed. Okay, greed is by far and away the most obvious reason why they get into it. A lot of them will say, particularly in India, that they really have no choice in the matter and they will not get any other sort of job. Personally, I still don't buy that particularly. I still think that no matter what you do, you always have a choice whether you want to get into scams or something else. And there was one group in particular, I managed to get quite a bit of footage into a business in India, and they were like a lot of the large scam call centers. They run a legit business and a scam operation, because I guess it's easier to launder the money that way. You can be shown to trade. These guys were trading on things like Amazon and eBay, and in the evening time they would run the Microsoft scam. They would scam people in the USA. And I personally asked the business owner, why do you do this? Because you have a legitimate operation. You do make money from that. Why do you also do the scams? And he said the reason why he personally got into it was his business would have lost money during the pandemic period. And he thought that the best way of retaining his staff and his business would be to open up a scam operation in the evening. And he just kept that going. So even though the pandemic had ended, he still kept this going because obviously it's making him a fair bit of money as well. So I kind of didn't buy it because by the time that I eventually exposed him and his group, the pandemic was well over. So you kind of think to yourself, well, your staff, your business survived and everything else. This is your opportunity to then give that up. So even though he'd given me that story, I still don't honestly believe that it was anything other than greed. So, but of course, everybody's different and everybody's personal circumstances have to be different. But I don't buy the bit where you have no choice. I mean, I personally obviously don't live in India and I don't know everybody's situation, but I still find it hard to believe that you can't at least get a conscience, or at least some people initially maybe do go into a call center and think it's legit, but you know very quickly whether it's a scam or not.
The psychological impact on victims. An interesting aspect about scammers and their scripts is that they're well designed to take advantage of a victim's emotional vulnerabilities, even exploiting their cognitive biases. For example, they may try to create a sense of urgency within their victims, where if they were to choose to delay an action that they were instructed to perform, they may face some sort of consequence. For instance, in refund scams where scammers falsely claim to have sent an excessive amount of money, they may appeal to the sympathetic side of their victims with statements such as, "I could lose my job if you didn't return the money immediately," giving victims very little time to think and reflect on the call, and instead urge to act, and act. Going beyond deception, certain scammers even employ intimidation tactics, threatening their victims with the possibility of jail time. Scammers also exhibit a remarkable ability to forge emotional bonds with their victims, creating a sense of attachment so strong that the victim may even disregard warnings from people's concern for them, remaining blind to the possibility of falling victim to a scam.
Scammers groom their victims, and there's no two ways about that. They are on the phone with them, establishing a relationship with their victim, and these guys are professionals. They know what to say. They know the type of responses that they should be giving to their victims. So it's easy to kind of look at this from the outside and you've got a bit of knowledge and you know it's a scam and think that, well, why wouldn't anybody else catch on to this? And the problem is you're never in that real victim's shoes. You're never in the person. You don't know what happened to that person previously. You don't know that there might be something that triggers them to think this has to be legitimate. The circumstances for everybody is very different, and it's almost impossible to predict who will actually, I hate the word fall for a scam, because it's become a victim of a scam, because again, everybody's different. Everybody has had a different background to you. And although most people, whenever I call them and say, look, that last caller, it's a scam, or that wasn't your bank, or that wasn't Amazon, most people, it triggers something with them and they go, okay, yes, that makes sense. But you do get the odd person, unfortunately, who, because they've built a relationship with the scammer, and it's Stockholm syndrome, whatever you want to call it, they are almost impossible to get through to. And yeah, this is the sad thing. You can never get through to absolutely everybody, and scammers are professionals. I am certainly not. Those same people could probably make excellent salespeople, on a legitimate front. They're obviously very persuasive. These guys, English is the second language. They are skilled in what they do, and Absolutely. They have the experience of what to say. So yeah, it is somebody who is not in that area up against a professional, and you always have to bear that in mind.
As Jim mentions, when looking from the outside and listening to some of these calls, it may seem obvious to label it as a scam. But when placed in the same position, the situation might not be as clear-cut. A lot of people may scoff and think that they'd never fall for this, but anyone can be a victim.
Anyone can become a victim of a scam. And I keep saying this, I have been a victim of a scam personally. And I was even at a convention on anti-scam operations a couple of weeks ago, and everybody who was in this convention, there was maybe 300 people there. And just before the whole event started, they sent out an email which wasn't quite from the right anti-scam call center, but it was something very similar, basically the type of scam email that everybody may receive, and it was to do with a free lunch at this event. And about 5% of those so-called professionals clicked on this link, and they're able to show that. And these are the most professional people in that area you can imagine, but still 5% of people actually click that link. And
free food,
it just shows you, and this is the reality, is if you're having an off day, just an off day, you're not concentrating on something, you're just distracted by something else, though that's the moment that you will unfortunately fall for a scam. That is the time that will happen, and it can happen to everyone.
Jim's story solidifies the fact that no matter how experienced you are or may think you are, you can always be vulnerable to a scam, especially if you're distracted or caught off guard at the wrong time or situation. Preventative measures. Even so, how can we reduce the chances of being scammed? How can we ensure that we're taking the necessary steps to keep ourselves far away from becoming a victim? Here's Jim's advice.
Yeah, I think the first one would be always be wary of people who approach you. So instead of, if you reach out to your bank or to whatever company you want to get in touch with, that's fine. You can usually trust it that way around. But if someone sends you an email out of the blue, or phones you out of the blue, or sends this SMS or whatever method, either way it has come to you out of the blue, I think be wary of that. That's how most scams start, something you weren't expecting. So again, just be more vigilant if someone approaches you, and that doesn't just rely on having a computer or a phone. It's even someone coming up to you in the street. Okay, so if someone approaches you, be wary of it. I think that's the first one. The second one is that there's always, there's usually markers, indicators of a scam. And although you've heard this lots and lots maybe before, but if anybody's either trying to put pressure on you to do something reasonably quickly, or stay on the phone, or not discuss it with anyone else, don't discuss it with your husband, wife, don't discuss it with your whoever, those are real hallmarks of a scam. There's no legit organization should be asking you to keep something a secret, and for you to make particularly a financial decision fairly quickly. It is always going to be difficult to tell whether it's a scam or not. But again, if the approach has come from outside, if you get an inbound call, try to stop it as early as you can and verify it. And no legit organization will ever have a problem with you saying, I hear what you say, but I would like to just check on this. And you hang up at that point. So giving yourself that little bit of time to either think about it or research it is always a good thing. And chances are, if you hang up and you get an almost immediate phone call back, that's another hallmark of a scam as well. Because the scammers will want to keep the pressure on you, and your response should be, let's take this pressure off and give me a bit of time to do that. So I think all of those things is be wary of approaches, take yourself out of the loop by hanging up and researching it and you making the call, and again, give yourself that time.
It's crucial to remember that legitimate organizations will respect your need for verification and will not pressure you into immediate decisions or secrecy. If you ever encounter an unexpected communication urging urgency and confidentiality, consider it a potential red flag. Taking the initiative to verify any unsolicited contact, whether through research or by directly contacting the company or individual using trusted contact details, adds an extra layer of protection against potential scams. Maintaining a healthy skepticism and refusing to be rushed into any decision can significantly reduce the risk of falling victim to these fraudulent schemes. For a comprehensive overview of scams affecting Australians daily and advice on how to prevent falling victims to scams, you can visit scamwatch.gov.au. Use this website to report scams you have been a victim of and check on the financial support you may be eligible to receive from the government. If you're located elsewhere in the world, you might want to look up resources provided by your government in order to combat these scams. To take a look at the full discussion between myself and Jim Browning, you will likely want to stay tuned for the podcast episode we plan to release in the near future, where we discuss how Jim got started on his career as a scambaiter, the growth of the artificial intelligence and its use case in future scams, as well as a deeper look into some of the topics we've discussed today. Until then, hit the subscribe button, stay vigilant, and stay tuned to Gridware Cybersecurity.